For my senior portfolio, I chose the theme of descent because I feel like it is the one among our options that most accurately describes my journey through this school. For most people, high school is either one of the best times of their lives or one of the worst, and unfortunately for me, it was a 4-year trip through hell. But there is a light at the end of every dark tunnel, and spending a long time in that darkness makes us appreciate the light even more. Facing difficult times is an important part of personal development, so even though my time here hasn't been very enjoyable, it has helped me grow a lot as a person. My portfolio demonstrates how various people, both real and fictional, have developed and changed after facing negative experiences in their lives. I dedicated my portfolio to Mary Shelley because Frankenstein was my favorite book from this year, and it is one of the few books that I've ever read that has a character that I can relate to, namely the monster. It reads, "To Mary Shelley, for helping me learn that solitude can be beautiful and enjoyable once one relieves themselves from the burden of loneliness." This may not make sense at first glance because many people think that loneliness and solitude are the same thing, but they aren't. Solitude is simply the state of being alone, while loneliness is a desire to be in the company of others. If a person gets rid of this desire, then being alone can be a wonderful experience. I learned this from Frankenstein because the monster didn't start to become miserable until he became aware of people and wanted to be around them. At that point, it began to feel lonely and proceed to commit horrible acts. As a person who spends much of my time alone, I have also been plagued by the feeling of loneliness for much of my life. Once I read this book and saw the monster enjoying his time of solitude before it came into contact with humans, I realized that the only way to overcome my loneliness was to shed my desire to constantly interact with other humans. Slowly but surely I have reached that point, and now I don't mind the fact that I am by myself most of the time. I've learned to enjoy being with myself, and I probably wouldn't have if I had never read this book. So thanks, Shelley. For my overview essay, I chose the novels Heart of Darkness, Frankenstein, and of course, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I focused on all the main characters in each book and how they demonstrated the idea of personal growth through descent. In each novel, the main characters go through several negative experiences that cause them to change their opinion of the world around them. In Heart of Darkness, Marlowe explains at one point that he had been fascinated with maps and exploration since he was a young boy. When he was little, world maps were mostly blank because at that time much of the world had not been explored by the Europeans. He used to imagine all the different types of wonderful places that could be in those blank spots. Once he got older and the area where Africa is had been filled in, his innocent dreams of what could have been there were replaced by the harsh reality of what was actually there. This flashback to his childhood happens near the beginning of the book, and it foreshadows later events of the novella. Losing his childhood fantasies by becoming aware of what the world is really like can be viewed as a descent from the naive innocence into a cold reality, which is an experience that we all go through as we grow, and it is the first step to maturity. In Frankenstein, the monster starts its life with the mind of a young child. It is curious about its surroundings and eager to learn as much as it can. It is free from negative emotions like grief and hatred until it comes into contact with humans. Gradually, it begins to resent humans as they scorn and reject the monster despite all of its attempts to be helpful and friendly towards them. It eventually reaches a point where it despises all humans, especially its creator. This descent from innocent benevolence to resentful malice is what most people go through once they experience the darker side of humanity. And while it is a form of growth, it is certainly not a positive one. In A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Stephen goes through many changes in his early life. The one that is most akin to descent is when he begins to constantly seek out physical pleasures. He started out as a somewhat religious young boy, and he temporarily abandoned his faith for the sake of worldly pleasures. From a religious perspective, he is like a fallen angel. He used to live his life according to the teachings of his religion, then he gave it up to do what made him feel good. After living this sinful lifestyle, he changes his behavior once he realized his behavior would have unfavorable consequences. His descent into a life of lust and gluttony eventually led him to a life of discipline and piety. He learned from his mistakes and changed into a different person. My sonnet is not that great, so I'm not going to read it. It's so bad that I'm actually kind of ashamed of it. It's titled Road to Hell, and it's about how Stephen's soul had temporarily died while he lived a sinful life, and it was reborn again once he returned to his religion. The poem compares that point in his life to the death and rebirth of the mythical phoenix. how he was consumed by the fire of self-gratification and reborn as a holy man from his ashes.